Hey guys, welcome back to an episode of what I'm officially going to title these little bonus episodes. Another episode of the Unheralded Calcio Legends. A little fun project for me, kind of looking back at players who were kind of the low-key fun players to watch in Serie A from the 2000s to 2010s, a really great era where a lot of people chose more so to watch the Premier League. But if you stuck and watched Serie A, even after Calciopoli and during the Inter dominance and Juve dominance periods, really great players, some interesting quirkiness of the league that you see, and just some awesome, really what makes the Serie A great. It just becomes a drama, and these are some great contributing cast members, I guess we would say, to Serie A during this time period. So we've done Rodrigo Tadei, we've done Massimo Maccarone. Last week I did one on Davide Biondini, and this week we're going to start out doing Sergio Pellissier, the Chievo Verona legend. I think he played like 20 years there. Striker, scored bags of goals. Pretty well known, kind of on that level of a Micoli and a Di Natale. Maybe not up to that height, but loyal servant to a fun Chievo side. But doing a little bit of research on him, I found and completely forgot about this guy. But Luciano, the right winger Brazilian who played for Chievo all those years, and figured instead of doing someone as popular as Sergio Pellissier, we were going to do Luciano. So, yes, today, all the way from the Flying Donkeys of Calcio, Chievo Verona, we're going to do a little profile piece on Luciano. Luciano Sequeira de Oliveira, I hope I'm pronouncing that right with Portuguese, aka just known as Luciano. He was born on the 3rd of December, 1975 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Began his career very similarly and even played on the same team for a season as Rodrigo Tadei, the first guy we did on this little piece. He started out at Palmeiras in Brazil in their youth squad in 1996, and which is a little controversial. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Didn't know a lot about this guy going into a Luciano, but I'm glad I did this because I learned some pretty funny stuff, which just totally contributes to that drama of Serie A, like I was saying earlier. But yeah, he was at the youth squad at Palmeiras in Brazil. Palmeiras, however you pronounce it. I think it's Palmeiras if you are Portuguese. Not entirely sure. But he was on the senior squad from 97 to 98 with Tadei, like I mentioned. They also had Fenerbahce legend Alex on that squad and former Milan and Bayer Leverkusen Brazilian player, defender, Roque Jr. He's a hardworking, somewhat creative right winger. Luciano, he earned his move to Italy, though, in 1998 to Bologna. That's really where we'll dig in deep, is whenever he moved to Italy. He spent 2 seasons at Bologna. He only made 33 total appearances for the club. They finished 9th in 98, 99, and then 11th in the 1999 and 2000 season. Played under managers Carlo Mazzone, who was the manager who didn't give him his first appearance, his first cap for Roma, but he was a manager who gave Francesco Totti it was one of his first managers. I think it was his first full season manager in the senior squad at Roma. And he gave Totti a lot of appearances and kind of thrusted Totti into the limelight of Italian football. And another manager there at Bologna for Luciano was Francesco Guidolin. Bounced around Serie A for a while. But apparently Luciano, he only made 33 appearances in those 2 seasons. He was known kind of for being troublesome, which I think is what kind of led him to being sent on loan in the 2000-2001 season to the Giallo-Blu Chievo Verona, which is where he spent the next 12 seasons at, if you don't include one season off loan. He would spend the 12 seasons there, like I mentioned, amassing 249 appearances and 16 goals in his time at Chievo. Chievo was originally a Serie B side in the season that he moved there on loan. Here's another typical Serie A borderline racist, which is typical of that era Serie A kind of bit that I read about. He formed a partnership. He was the right winger, and then Cristian Manfredini was on the left. And Manfredini I think he was Ivorian, whereas Luciano is Brazilian, but a black Brazilian. And their nicknames were the Black Arrows. And that's just, typical Calcio, whether you like it or not. It's an interesting nickname, to say the least. But that first season, they were promoted to Serie A. They finished third in Serie B. That led Chievo to purchase half his rights from Bologna, so kind of making it partially permanent. It's the thing we mentioned last podcast, or last one of these, the Unheralded Calcio Legends. Serie A had the co-ownership deals that were big. You see a lot of that, and that's what this is, which the next season, they ended up they went to an auction or something, which they won outright after they couldn't agree a fee to pay the full ownership with Bologna for Luciano. Really interesting, weird stuff that you only saw really in Serie A during this time. A lot of that happened. But was a full Chievo Verona player as of 2002. But something happens. And this is what I was alluding to earlier. A little bit of controversy and craziness that is insane and is indicative, again, of Serie A during this era. There's always something crazy going on in Serie A in the 2000s, it seemed like. But he came out, from what it seemed, this is just what I was reading, he came out and exposed himself as holding a fake passport and not being who he says he was. And I'm going to back up a little bit. This whole journey that I've took you on so far for him, he wasn't going under the name Luciano. He was going under the name Heriberto, which everyone knew him as. But apparently, growing up, he had somehow stole the identity of his neighbor to be able to play for the Palmeiras youth team. And then he said something along the lines of that he was also he did it, and it was because his Bologna move might have been in jeopardy if he'd have been older. But this guy was actually 4 years older than he said. So originally they thought he was born in 1979, but so that would have led him to be like 22, 23 at this time. He was actually 27, 28. He was born in 1975. And yeah, he was known as Heriberto during this whole time. Crazy, crazy stuff. But yeah, took his neighbor's identity. Originally announced that the FIGC and FIFA would suspend Luciano. It was also reported that he lied, or that he was also supposed to move to Lazio that summer, along with Manfredini, the quote-unquote, this was this time, not saying Black Arrows, but they gave him a 6-month ban, $145,000 fine, and eventually an 8-month suspended jail sentence was all handed down to Luciano. Ends up, he was suspended for half of the 2002-2003 season, the first 6 months. That was a 6-month ban. And just crazy, absolute insane stuff. Like, he ratted himself out, apparently because he wanted to make sure his newborn son could have his surname, his real surname. Just crazy stuff. He was able to return January of 2003 and help Chievo in the season in 7th after barely missing out on UEFA Cup after they had finished 5th before and were in the UEFA Cup. They also lost in the first round of qualifying of the UEFA Cup that 2002-2003 season, which he wouldn't have been a part of due to the suspension, to Red Star Belgrade. 2-0 on aggregate. But he returned, played out the last half of the season, and that's when they finished 7th. That summer, though, who I didn't even know this, or I might have, honestly. I think I looked him up back when Wikipedia was first starting. This was probably around like 2008, 2009. That was really how you figured out who these players were. We're getting on your desktop computer, YouTube, Wikipedia, those two. And it seemed like I'd maybe known, I could be chatting shit, that he was sent on loan in 2003 to Inter. So a step up from Chievo to Inter, kind of crazy. He was an industrious winger. So, I mean, Inter at that time, I think played a 4-3-3 or 4-4-2. Wide guys, Vandermeer, Julie. They had some decent times, and we needed some rotational pieces as well. But Luciano didn't make his first appearance until November 22nd of that season. He ended up only making, I think, 5 total appearances, that whole time. Really no impact with Inter, so he was sent back to Verona. And he stayed at Chievo. That was pretty much who he ended his top-flight Italian football career with. Originally, when he went back, he was a backup rotational winger. Coincidentally enough, played behind a player by the name of Franco Simioli, which is funny because Inter, that's a player that Inter sent to Chievo as part of the deal, sending Luciano to Inter. He would make about 20 appearances a season in the 04 and 05, or 04-05 and 05-06 seasons. This team's had Pellissier, as mentioned earlier, who's an absolute Chievo legend, Verona legend. They had Amauri, if you remember, the Brazilian, played for Juventus. I think he actually nationalized Italian and got a couple of Italian caps. Ghanaian John Mensah, longtime Roma midfielder Matteo Brighi was on these squads. Future Inter striker from that treble-winning side, I believe, Victor Albina. And another, if you really watch Serie A during this, and would be a fun one to do maybe, another Serie A cult legend, striker Simone Tiribocchi. They finished 4th in the 05-06 season. This was actually due to the Calciopoli scandal that we mentioned earlier, 05-06 season. They had finished 7th, had a really great season, a really good run. But due to Calciopoli and all the fines and point deductions, Chievo actually finished 4th and qualified for the Champions League. Huge. When you think about Chievo now, they're all the way down in Serie D. So the fact that in 2006, 2007, they made it to the Champions League qualifying rounds is pretty incredible stuff. But it showed they had players like this. This is a team. We had teams like this in Serie A during this time that a lot of people are now remembering. Mostly Palermo or Sassuolo sides of the 2010s. But Chievo had a little run there with some really great players. They would be eliminated, though, in the 3rd round of qualifying that season for UEFA Champions League. They lost 4-2 in aggregate to, and hopefully I'm pronouncing this, it's Bulgarian side Levski Sofia. But eventually, that same season, getting knocked out on qualifying, they were relegated. I think just the mass influx of games that they had that season, it took its toll. And them getting relegated, though, for a player like Luciano it had to have sucked being a player and getting back to Serie B. But it was the break that he needed to really become that Chievo cult legend that they had at a good run after this. They immediately gained promotion back to Serie A after winning the 07-08 Serie B. They won it over Bologna by, I think it was a point. And then they would stay in Serie A for the rest of their time, or Luciano's time at Chievo. He would help them finish in the next 4 or 5 seasons. They would finish mid-table from anywhere from 16th at their lowest to 10th at their highest. And that's where he finished his career, the city of Romeo and Juliet, Verona. He would play there and eventually call it quits after a couple injury-laden seasons towards the end of his time at Chievo. The 2012-2013 season was his last season there. He'd moved to Lega Pro Seconda Divisione. It's actually Divisione. which is now the Serie C2, or Due, Serie C2. And he would go to the side Monteva, and only played there 6 times during that injury-laden season. Again, really got some injuries the last few years. I think it was because he was actually older than shit. Just no one really remembered that. The passport story just blows my mind. It's crazy. But what legacy. I think he'll be remembered for playing for that Chievo team that seemed to always just be a pesky side to have to go play, especially away at. It was always a tough match for Inter. I feel like there's the one where Crespo scored, and then Balotelli had a fucking wonder volley that ended 2-1, or maybe it was 2-2. And then a couple of times at the San Siro, I feel like we needed either it was a tough match or Ibra would have to come on and save us. But those teams were always special. Luciano seemed to always pop up and play well in a lot of matches. You can't forget him flying on that right side with Pellissier. And those teams were fun to watch. I loved watching those Chievo teams. I think he'll also be remembered for his controversy and this forgery of an identity, which is just absolutely nuts that someone could actually do that in the 2000s in Italy. But he also, with these teams, some other memorable players that he played with, Francesco Acerbi, a young Acerbi, played with him. Simone Baroni. We had Albanian Erhan Bagdoni. Michael Bradley, the American, was on one of these teams. Slovenian Boštjan Cesar. Nicola Legrotali. Simone Perotta. If you remember, Milan defender, Colombian Mario Yepes. And then finally a guy I remember a lot for those Chievo teams as well, Frenchman Nicolas Frey, his younger brother, I believe, to the Frey, that was a keeper for Inter and Fiorentina for a while. And then he played under some good managers. Luigi Del Neri, when he first got there, who was probably Chievo's best manager of all time. Bounced around, went to Udinese. He made a big move up. I can't remember exactly who it was, but Del Neri was great while he was there. Giuseppe Iacchini, if you know the baseball hat, manager on the sidelines. I think he's been with Lecce, a few other squads. Domenico Di Carlo, Stefano Pioli was one of his managers who won the Scudetto with Milan, and then Eugenio Corini. But yeah, that's what I think we'll know and remember Luciano by, is his time at Chievo, being a fun player, and now his crazy, controversial stories. But yeah, that's the end. It was really fun to do this deep dive. I really enjoy these series, and if anything, I'm going to keep doing these at the least. If you guys have any comments or want anybody to have any ideas of who I should do next, let me know in the comments. Please share, like, subscribe, comment, do whatever. Really appreciate the support and appreciate all you guys. And as always, Forza Inter. Thanks.